I was sinking down this week, sinking down. I thought we were about to elect the first woman president of the United States of America. My first thoughts upon waking up on Wednesday morning was I felt like I was living in a country where a majority preferred meanness and prejudice and chauvinism to kindness and inclusion and equality. I was naive because I didn't think a majority of American voters would buy what our president-elect was selling. I was disappointed. I was angry. I was confused. And I was scared. Scared of the possibility, for the first time in my life, of living in an authoritarian state. Now, just saying it seems reactionary. And yet, is it? Is it over the top to be wondering, will we begin to have detention camps and mass deportation, as our next president has told us? Will there be retribution to political opponents of the president, which he has promised? Is Project 2025 the blueprint for the future of America? Will being transgender become illegal? Is the Affordable Care Act going away? Is the Department of Education going away? What does this election mean for the climate, I wondered. Am I the only one who's been feeling this way? All right, good. All right, I just wanted to check. Now, you'll be glad to know that I turned to look for inspiration to one of my favorite Unitarian ministers of the 20th century, A. Powell Davies, who lived before and after World War II and served All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. He understood that American patriotism is not an allegiance to a group of people. It is an allegiance to an idea and a set of principles. I'm not sure these principles unify our country anymore. See what you think. He said, the American commitment is to universal justice, the rights of all people, not the special interests of some. It's a commitment to tolerance, to neighborliness. It's a commitment to the common good. It's compassionate, humanitarian. It's the golden rule. It battles prejudice and false opinion. It seeks the truth. It has no use for intolerance. It prefers honesty and goodwill over narrow-mindedness. This nation, he reminds us, was founded on an affirmation of our inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I woke up Wednesday realizing that the pursuit of these ideals, however lofty and aspirational, no longer seem to unite the majority of us. Joe Biden tried to reassure us this week by saying that everything is going to be all right. Really? I don't know, Joe. This kind of reassurance reminds me of some of the religious perspectives that I've been hearing from some, that God is in charge, so we have nothing to worry about. Now, I'm not a minister who professes that there is a God up in the sky who's going to fix things for us. If so, what has he, she, they been waiting for? As much as I've tried, I don't find a bit of solace or hope in such an idea of God. So you probably want to know, what does keep my spirit up at a time like this? What good news do I have? So I'm reminded that I'm going to bring it on. I'm reminded that the human struggle for justice and equality does not end with one election. At a moment like this, we need to consider the long arc of human history. And we must remain faithful to the many people who have gone before us in the struggle for equality and freedom. There have been enormous efforts and sacrifices to end slavery and attain women's suffrage and defeat Jim Crow and to win marriage equality, to break up monopolies, to end child labor, and even to have a nation built on democracy and the rule of law rather than the right of kings. We are the beneficiary of all these efforts and sacrifices. And to stop now or to feel defeated would be to break faith with those who have paved the way for our freedom. One thing's for sure, justice and freedom are not automatic. Another thing that's for sure is that it does not just happen on election day. The march for equality and freedom is painstaking and it's heartbreaking, but it's not futile and it's definitely not over. I don't think it ever ends. I don't think we ever finally arrive at equality and justice. There was no time in the past when it was perfect, and there will likely be no time in the future, since democracy is a human enterprise, and humans are not fallen, but we are fallible. The struggle for freedom and justice will forever be a part of the human story. Part of being alive and engaged in life is working to create the world that we want to live in and that we want to pass on to the future. If nothing else, this year's election is an invitation to be part of that great tradition of people all over the world and all across time who have sought to use their lives to bring more freedom and more equality and more justice into the world. That is a life of great meaning and purpose in which we're able to thrust the roots of our life down into. And as A. Paul Davies said, the lives that have been most deeply rooted in that struggle have grown tallest against the sky. When the winds and the rain and the storms come, it's the trees that are most deeply rooted in the soil that survive. And when the winds and the rains and the storms of our democracy come, it is the lives of those most deeply rooted in the soil of freedom and equality and justice for all that will and must survive. Because even those whose lives are taken from them in this quest, people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Harvey Milk and Fannie Lou Hamer and Medgar Evers and Viola Liuzzo and Marsha P. Johnson and countless other men and women and non-binary people who dedicated their lives to making the world better for others and for future generations, they still survive in our public conscience, and they keep inspiring us. Their lives were rooted in freedom and are still bearing fruit. And you and I are invited today to sink our roots deeper into the soil, into the struggle for human dignity and human rights. Now, this is a time when we need to keep faith with all of these people and our ideals. Curtailing the rights of others or seeking retribution upon political opponents is a form of forsaking the very principles upon which this nation was founded. So what can we do if it happens? Well, this past Thursday night, right here in this sanctuary, All Souls hosted the Jewish Federation of Tulsa for a Kristallnacht remembrance service. Now, Kristallnacht is most commonly translated as the night of broken glass. It was one night on November 9th through 10th, 1938. That is 86 years ago last night, when the Nazis broke windows and burnt down over 1,400 Jewish synagogues and institutions all over Germany. The professor who gave the keynote speech on Thursday, Dr. Jennifer Hoyer, explained that the purpose of these attacks was to gauge the German population's willingness to go along with state-sponsored violence. The Nazis wanted to see how the people would respond. And in the face of state-sponsored burning and breaking of buildings, the German people, by and large, sat by and watched. The crowds came out, and many were undoubtedly horrified and in disbelief, but they didn't do anything. And this set the stage for the horrors of the Holocaust that followed, that led to the murders of millions of Jews and thousands of Africans and disabled people and gay people and other religious and ethnic minorities. Now, I hope Joe Biden and my friends and our church members who voted for our president-elect are right, that all is going to be just fine in our country under the next president. But I also want us to be ready, because he can't do it without us. The citizens have to capitulate for tyranny to be successful. So if, for example, state-sponsored militias begin to burn down Spanish language and other churches and institutions that cater to immigrants, or the businesses or homes of immigrants, we need to react and respond and not let it be okay. We've seen how the violence of January 6th, 2021 has been scrubbed of outrage and shame, and has come to be portrayed by some, including our next president, as a gathering of love and patriotism. And our next president has made it plain that he believes the bad people in the January 6th story are the FBI and the judges and the Justice Department, not the perpetrators. Now, I'm not saying that we're heading for totalitarianism, but that is a textbook example of how totalitarianism starts. Violence and destruction get normalized, and the people become accustomed to it. And the systems of accountability are undermined and diminished. It almost happened here. During the Cold War, the United States saw the rise of fear-driven policies like McCarthyism. McCarthyism, led by Senator Joseph McCarthy in the early 1950s, was a time of intense anti-communist hysteria. At the time, individuals were often accused of being communist sympathizers or spies without concrete evidence. These accusations were typically made during public hearings, particularly by the House Un-American Activities Committee and the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, like the Hollywood 10, when in 1947, 10 screenwriters, directors, and producers were blacklisted for refusing to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, citing their First Amendment rights. They were charged with contempt of Congress and sentenced to prison terms because they would not capitulate. Tyranny cannot take hold unless the people let it. And in 1954, the Army McCarthy hearings were a televised public spectacle in this country where Senator McCarthy accused members of the United States Army of harboring communists. The hearings were intended to intimidate people, some of whom were military personnel, leading to the public vilification and blacklisting of many people. It was all done in the name of national security. They violated basic civil rights, and they normalized the targeting of perceived enemies of the state. Friends, it's come close to happening here before. We've had demagogues in high places in our government before. Now, a demagogue is a political leader who gains support by appealing to the fears and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using rational argument. They're eating our pets. They're stealing our jobs. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. They're the enemy of the people. The reason folks are so concerned is that even if people like his policies, our new president-elect is a demagogue. According to the experts on tyranny, like Timothy Snyder, two things that make tyranny possible are anxiety and loneliness. So we need to remain calm and rational and build community and join in solidarity. Because it begins with the immigrants or with the Jews or the trans folks. We're made to fear that they're harming our children or poisoning the blood of our nation. But friends, if we let any one of us be attacked, we are all going to lose. We need each other. And we can do this. After the September 11th attacks, mosques in New York and across the country received threats and were vandalized. And knowing this, neighbors from different faith backgrounds, including Christians and Jews and non-religious people, formed circles of protection around certain mosques, showing up to keep watch and keep them safe, and to express solidarity with our Muslim neighbors. Keep in mind, whenever there have been movements of discrimination and violation in this country, there have always been helpers who courageously stood up for what is right. We cannot do it alone. And that's why we need to support institutions like All Souls and others that have an unequivocal commitment to freedom and justice for all. Institutions that are committed to speaking the truth at whatever cost and committed to building solidarity among different people. I read a quote this week that said, "If you don't understand why your trans friends are so worried right now, then you don't have any trans friends." If you're a part of the All Souls community, then you are more likely than most to have some transgender people in your life. If you are transgender, then you're part of a community, and I want you to know that you are not alone and you are loved. There will always likely be a certain percentage of society that will fear strangers, that will desire for men to dominate over women, and who believe in superstition over science. But we at All Souls stand strongly against such ideas. We have a vision of a world where everyone can be who they are without fear or favor, where everyone knows that they're blessed and they are a blessing. There has never been a more important time for us to invest in this kind of love and community. My good news for you today is that part of the very meaning of our life, comes from aligning ourselves with all those great and ordinary people like Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks and Ruby Bridges and Helen Keller and Sojourner Truth and Mother Leslie Bennington Randall and the unnamed at Seneca Falls and Stonewall and Selma and Normandy. And on this Veterans Day weekend, let us never forget all those in our military who have sacrificed to serve our country and preserve our freedom. Friends, let us sink our roots deep in this soil. Remember to nurture your body and your spirit in the weeks and the months ahead. We need you healthy and strong of will. When you can't go on, we will carry you. And when we can't go on, we know that you will carry us. We need each other now as much as ever. I know we'll get through this next 4 years, whatever it brings, not because I know that everything will be all right, but because we have each other to help us, to think clearly, to feel deeply, and to act boldly. We are a community committed to freedom. And all those who came before us are cheering us on. And all those who will come after are counting on us. And we will keep faith with them. Because as Wayne Arneson said, the way is often hard, and the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. I love you.